How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 6 of What If Deku Was One Punch Man. And now, let's begin. A week passes as we now see all of Izuku's classmates sitting on a bus. As they were all sitting, talking to each other and all of that, Izawa would then tell all of them to get out of the bus as it came to a screeching halt. As they would all pile out of the bus, as they were now looking over one of the guardrails down below at just the ground beneath them. They were quite high up. And so when 4 heroes came out of nowhere saying that the wild pussycats, many of them were still kind of confused along with what was going to happen. Izawa would introduce all of them, saying that these were the heroes that were going to help them just make their quirks and powers just stronger. And the way they're going to do that is their first training lesson, which is just going to be a start on what all of the hell they're going to be doing over the next couple of months here. So as all of this would be happening, one of them would slam their hands down onto the ground as the ground would start to shake. As all of a sudden, a landslide would happen, causing to where the students were standing to fall down, and they would all just now be on the ground beneath where they once were, up on the top of the road. So with that, Izuku would tell everyone that he has a plan as he would wait for the bus to speed off. As the bus would go off throughout the mountains onto the training camp, Izuku would tell all of his classmates his plan. He's going to jump up and look for where the training camp is, and once he finds it, he's going to jump up and carry one student or 2 or 3 at a time over towards the training camp and drop them off there before jumping back and repeating. So as all of his classmates would nod their heads, Izuku would grab the floor with his feet before jumping up in the air, looking off towards where the training camp was. He would spot a tiny little building miles away from where they were, so Izuku, falling back to the ground, would land before picking up 3 of his classmates, one holding onto his back while 2 of them were being held by Izuku's both hands. Izuku would jump up in the direction of where the training camp building was, as Izuku would easily make it there with ease before dropping all of them off before jumping back to where his other classmates were. Izuku would keep on doing this until none of the classmates were left. Even though Bakugo or some other students said they didn't want Izuku to carry them like 100 feet up to the ground and possibly drop them, Izuku wouldn't care, just grabbing them and jumping off, saying that, come on, you have to face your fears sometime. You can't always be scared of heights. And so all of the students now at the training camp would all be just sitting around at a picnic table, just talking to each other, eating some of the food that was left out in sort of a buffet style right outside of the building. As the heroes there had left it there, like covered, that so no bugs would get in it. However, they knew that these students wouldn't get there until later at night if they went through the forest and started looking for the building. And they just left food out there for them, so when they got back. However, the heroes didn't expect them to be there within 5 minutes of being dropped off, as the bus still had a good hour throughout a windy road to even get there. And so when one of the heroes said, "Hey, Izawa, I don't see any of the students. You know how we placed those mud monsters throughout just the forest, right? I don't see any of them through the mud monster's eyes." Izawa would just sit back in his chair before smiling. "I know. Oh, I think they already made it there." "What? How? That's impossible. There's no chance they could have made it there already. They had at least 5 miles to run to get halfway there. There's no chance they could do that in only 5 minutes." Izawa would then just sort of laugh in a maniacal way. "Oh, there is one student that probably helped all of them get there, and it just so happens he's the strongest student. Really, do you mind telling us what his name and quirk is?" "I can only answer half that question. His name's Izuku Midoriya. His quirk, he doesn't have one, and that's the special thing about him." "He doesn't have a quirk? You're kidding, right, Izawa? You're just messing with us, right? There's no chance he could be that strong, having gotten all of the students there in the training camp in under 5 minutes without having a Quirk. You must be kidding, right? Izawa would simply shake his head as an hour would pass as the bus would slowly pull in to the summer training camp, where they would all see the students still sitting around at the picnic table just talking to each other. Izawa would walk out before calling Izuku over before asking him how all of them managed to get there so quickly, where Izuku would then tell the story about what he did, as one of the wild pussycats would then grab Izuku by both his shoulders, shaking him. "What's your quirk? Your teacher Izawa said you didn't have one. That can't be true, right?" As all three of the other cats would lean in, wondering what Izuku's answer would be, as Izuku would be let go and would simply shake his head. "Nope, I've been quirkless since the doctor told me I was quirkless, so yeah, it's quite the anomaly that I have a quirk. It's, quite strange," Izuku would say, just sort of laughing. As the next couple of weeks would end up passing, Class 1B would end up arriving just hours after Class 1A had, as their teacher decided to bring them up as well, not wanting them to be left behind by Class 1A. So with all of that happening, Izuku would be stretching out the next day as the cats would begin their training. However, Izuku would say, "I don't think I really need any training," as many of them, or they would all just laugh. "Oh, so now the quirkless kid's saying he doesn't need training." One of the cats would actually volunteer to fight Izuku, as they still hadn't seen Izuku's power. Izawa would warn one of them, or they would just say, "Please, I think I can beat him," as one of them would then realize, "Wait, Izawa, isn't there a simple way you could prove that Izuku doesn't have a quirk?" One of them would ask, as Izawa would then just have a light bulb go off in his head, before putting his hand to his forehead and just shaking. How did I not realize that before? I'm an idiot. "Alright, Izuku, I'm going to erase your quirk," Izawa would say, using finger quotation marks, as Izawa would erase his quirk, or at least try to, using Izawa's quirk, as Izuku would wind back his fist, punching it, as hundreds of trees in one direction would just be destroyed. As Izuku would look on towards Izawa, as Izawa would look on towards the cats, who would just be staring off in shock. "I guess he really doesn't have a quirk. But that's insane. This just doesn't make any sense." So the training would begin, with Izuku basically just being there to help many of his classmates, or now students, as he is basically a teacher's helper with Izawa. Izuku would be tasked with helping Shinso with his one-on-one combat for the first 3 days, as Izuku would just be training Shinso how to sort of throw fast punches, good punches, and all of that, as Shinso's really just going to have to be good at sort of that if his quirk doesn't work, as if Shinso's quirk is seen by one of the villains, and he saw through Shinso's trap, Shinso's dead meat, and so Izuku was tasked with at least training Shinso in some basic self-defense. And so Izuku would also be tasked as basically just being a body, or just a body to have thrown attacks at, as many of the students found out that Izuku is pretty much invulnerable to any of their attacks, and so whenever they try to throw one at him and it lands with complete contact, it doesn't hurt Izuku at all. And so Izuku would basically just be a body that they could throw their attacks at and just practice with, as Izuku was there. Izuku would also be just training and fighting with barely any percentage of his power, so that they could learn how to fight people with stronger strength quirks. As a month and a half would end up passing, as it was finally the last day of the summer training camp, as all of them would just be rejoicing that their hell of a month and a half was finally over, as all of them would be sitting around, lounging around in the hot springs or anything, being given the day off by Izawa along with the rest of the teachers. So, with the day off, all of them resting up as the night would end up coming, they would all be called out before they would end up being told that they're going to play a simple game of Class 1B versus Class 1A. Class 1A and B are going to go into the forest, and Class 1B is tasked with just scaring all of Class 1A, or just trying to scare them. Since it was quite dark out and it was a forest, it was seen as a perfect time to do sort of a horror game, and so that would start. Izuku, who just didn't want to do it, would be just sitting around before going inside to just go relax in the hot springs alone, before just leaving up to his thoughts. After 30 minutes of Izuku just sitting there, all of a sudden Izuku would just feel shaking and would hear a loud crash. Izuku would get up, put on his clothes before rushing out, looking out of the doors before opening them, and would see massive blue fire spreading over the tree line, where he would then see Izawa and Pussycats just standing there in complete shock, as they just weren't sure what had happened. Izuku would say he's going to get a higher vantage point before jumping up, much like he did to help all of his classmates get back towards the summer training camp. So with Izuku looking up, he would end up seeing that the fire had spread all throughout the forest, as Izuku would look on just in complete shock. "We need to get all the students back here," Izuku would yell, as many of them would nod. Izuku would tell both, or just the cats, to go out there and try to the students, while him and Izawa will just think of another type of plan. Izawa would agree with this, as the cats would go out looking for many of them. However, before they could even take a couple of steps forward, they would be surrounded by many other villains. Izuku would manage to disappear before rushing off, as he would end up finding just a random ledge. He had seen a small child around a couple of times named Kota, as he just happened to be one of the nephews of one of the cats. Izuku had heard the story of one of them after asking one of them about him, as Izuku would end up finding him just sitting alone at one of these ledges all the time. So Izuku would rush there, just presuming that he needed to go grab Kota quickly and bring him back, as Kota just wasn't going to do well in the midst of a villain attack. However, when Izuku arrived there, he would see Muscular, a massive villain, standing over Kota, just about to just kill him. As Izuku would rush in there, not dealing with anything or not holding back at all, he would wind back his fist, punching Muscular straight through the stomach. As Muscular, not ready for this, wouldn't be able to put tons of muscle over where he was about to get punched, so Izuku's punch would go right through Muscular's stomach, sending him flying over the ledge. As Muscular's fall would end up being broken by many of the trees. However, a tree branch would go right through the hole in his just stomach area. Muscular would yell out in pain before falling down to the ground, slowly just bleeding out, as Izuku would grab Kota, saving him this before rushing off, so that nothing else would happen to Kota, dropping him off back at where all of the heroes were, as Izuku would easily defeat two of the last villains that had surrounded them with a hostage. Izuku taking them out, he would rescue the hostage, which just happened to be Asui. As Izuku would rush around the forest once again, Izuku would finally end up spotting the main area. Many of the students had found their way back to training camp, while for a ton of them were also stuck in a fight with two villains, Dabi and Moonfish. Moonfish, who have sort of a teeth quirk, Izuku would grab the teeth, yanking him down before punching him right across the face, knocking him out instantly. As for Dabi, who would keep his distance with his fire, Izuku would ask Todoroki just to spread ice all throughout the area. As Todoroki would stomp his fist on the ground or stomp his foot on the ground, ice would spread over all of the trees around it, as the fire would struggle to melt all of the ice in time, as Izuku would glide along the ice before punching Dabi right across the face, before uppercutting him right in the stomach. As he would be sent flying upwards, a portal would be met he was, as he would fall into the portal or fall up into the portal, as he would now be seen back in the villain hideout. However, Izuku would end up just falling through another portal as well, as he would end up being just sat into a Quirk-canceling chair in the middle of nowhere. As we see now the camp kids or the classmates of Izuku staring on in shock as Izuku just slowly falls into this portal. Spocky would reach out trying to save Izuku. He couldn't, for just yelling, "Damn it! I was too slow!" He would think to himself, as we now see Izuku sitting back in this chair, just looking around, wondering what was happening. He could easily have broken out of this chair already, but he decided to wait and see what else was going to happen. So two people step out of the darkness, a blue-haired person, along with a Darth Vader-looking person that just happened to be All For One, the person Izuku had punched. "Hello, Izuku. I guess we meet again. Finally, I've been able to capture you. It's a shame your life has to end this way." I'm kidding. "You're gonna become one of our best Nomus. That's if I don't steal your Quirk. I've seen what you're capable of doing, and calling yourself Quirkless is just an idiot move. I know you have a Quirk, Izuku. It's just plain and obvious. No one can be as strong as you are without a Quirk. How could you be such an idiot to think anyone would believe your foolish plan, trying to think, oh, he's Quirkless? What a joke." As All For One would walk towards Izuku, placing his hand on his head before activating his power. However, nothing would happen. All For One would try again, however, nothing would happen, with Izuku just blankly staring up at All For One. "You know, All For One, I don't have a Quirk. I thought you were smart, but it turns out you're just an idiot. I've no reason to lie to you about not having a Quirk, so why do you think I would lie to you? There's just no reason at all for me to do something like that," Izuku would say, as the doctor would rush in out of nowhere with a needle trying to stab Izuku, over his hand would jolt up, breaking off the Quirk-canceling cuffs around him that bolted his arm down onto the chair's arm, as Izuku would grab the needle before twisting it around, putting it right into the doctor that tried to stab him with it. "That's not gonna work on me," before breaking his other hand off, punching the doctor square in the face, as All For One would look on before punching Izuku square in the face, launching him backwards. However, it would do nothing at all, as Izuku would up just seeing All For One disappear back into a portal, grabbing both the doctor and Shigaraki, who's still just in shock about how fast Izuku had moved to defeat him. As this was happening, all of the heroes back at UA were planning on a rescue mission. So, Momo said she planted a tracking device on one of those Nomus. So if we look at where it says it is, we could possibly find out where Izuku is. All Might would say, as many people around him would agree. As All Might was once this conversation was up, they all agreed they'll go out and find Izuku at 9 p.m. that night. The same night Izuku happened to get kidnapped. Well, actually at midnight, rather. So, with that, All Might would go over to the third-year dormitories, as he would end up knocking on Mirio's door. As Mirio would go over before seeing All Might standing outside of his dorm room door. As Mirio would say, "Oh, hey All Might, what are you doing here so late?" All Might would push Mirio back into his room before shutting the door behind him. "Look, Mirio, I may not have much more time to live. However, you deserve my power. You want to become a hero more than anyone. And so, I deem you worthy of getting my Quirk, one for all," All Might would say, as Mirio would look on just in complete shock at All Might. "Your Quirk? What do you mean, All Might?" All Might would then explain to Mirio all about it before handing Mirio one of his hair strands. "Eat this, Mirio, to gain my Quirk, one for all." Mirio would slowly just nod his head in confusion before eating his hair, as he'd just say, "Okay, I'll meet with you in the morning if I'm not dead by then. Mirio would look on in shock at All Might, asking why he was talking like that. However, All Might was already gone. One of Mirio's just people that he looked up to from a child, just said he might die tonight. Mirio was confused before looking onto his TV, flicking on the news, wondering what was going to happen, as he would be intently watching it, as hours would go by, as finally 12 a.m. struck the clock, as all of them would rush in, going towards the villain warehouse, smashing in to see tons of Nomus there, as all of them would have core-canceling handcuffs on them within an instant. So many of them would end up finding another separate warehouse location, which just happened to be where Izuku was being kept. Izuku decided to stay there, just wondering if they were ever going to come back. As All Might would end up smashing down the walls, Izuku would look on before greeting All Might. "Oh, hey, All Might. You're here too. That's cool. I'm waiting for All For One to come back. I want to fight him." All Might would look unquestioningly towards Izuku before just saying, "Okay," as they would smash down another wall, revealing what looked to be a bar with all the other villains. All Might, along with a wooded hero, would come in, capturing all of the villains. However, before they could put them into custody, All For One would come out of a gray, goopish-looking portal, as Izuku would jump into action, jumping in, smashing All For One's head clean in as his helmet would shatter around him, sending the bits of metal and plastic and all of that going right into All For One's face, causing blood to slowly seep out of these holes as All For One would grab all of the metal stuck in him and just pull it out, putting it onto the floor before jumping back at Izuku as his face slowly healed back. As All For One would punch Izuku, however it did nothing, as Izuku would punch All For One square in the chest, sending All For One flying backwards into a building, where he would then be met with a punch by All Might right in his back, sending him flying down to the ground, as All For One would get up just laughing at him. "Oh, All Might, your punches have grown weak," All For One would say, but right as he got up, he would be met with a punch square in his face, as Izuku sent him flying backwards into another punch by All Might, sending him flying back down. As All For One would get up again, he would be met with a rapid flurry of Izuku's punches. Izuku had been severely weakened by the fact that he didn't want to kill All For One. All For One may be a super powerful villain after all. However, he didn't want to kill him. Killing just isn't his thing, unless it's sort of a mindless thing, Nomu thing. But All For One is living. He has thoughts, and he probably has a family. Izuku just doesn't want to take someone away from that. Izuku just doesn't want to do something so vile. As Izuku would be doing this, we cut back to see Izuku's mother, Inko, staring intently at the TV, crying out, looking at her baby, her child, fighting a big bad villain, punching him rapidly. She just looked on in complete shock, hoping that Izuku was going to be okay after this fight, not wanting anything bad to happen to Izuku. As this was happening, cut back to see All For One with a finger barely being able to stand, as Izuku and All Might would finally let him stand, as his body would just really stand up, just wobbling, not being able to support himself, putting his arm onto the ground by a sticking up piece of concrete, All For One holding himself up by there, before injecting both of his fingers, or two of his fingers on his right hand, right into the concrete, allowing for his Quirk to eat away at the concrete, going down into the ground before being met with Shigaraki, as it would go slowly up Shigaraki's foot before finally reaching his head, as All For One would transfer all of his quirks into Shigaraki, allowing for All For One to live on, as All For One's body not having a regeneration quirk or an immortal quirk keeping him alive, he would slowly waste away, and just as his body would slowly deteriorate rapidly, as would then just turn into dust as his skeleton, as all of the flesh and muscle would slowly just disappear with his skeleton right after, as barely any bones would remain after that, just bones that would remain after 200 years of being left sitting somewhere, as All For One was hundreds of years old, seeing throughout generations, still being able to live. However, now with him gone, All For One is just nothing. He had managed to save Shigaraki along with the rest of the League of Villains. As we see All For One disappear as the news helicopter look on, just wondering what had happened. As Izuku and All Might would walk back to UA, where they would then meet in a conference room with the rest of the teachers. I have a bad feeling about All For One's death, Izuku would say. All Might would look questioningly on towards Izuku, as Izuku would end just speaking. You saw what he did to that concrete block. When we went over to look at what he did to it, there was a massive hole going right down into the ground. I think he was able to transfer his quirk onto someone else. I think he transferred his quirk to Shigaraki, and Shigaraki managed to get away. All for One, the quirk still lingers on. And I'm guessing he possibly transferred his mind into Shigaraki's body too, through some sort of quirk. So All For One still lives on, just through a different body. A younger body, a stronger one at that too, Izuku would say, as All Might would look on just in shock at Izuku. You really think so? It's a hunch, but I think he lives on. Hopefully he's still quite weak. It's still a new body and he'd still have to get used to it. But who knows? I guess we should just start preparing for another big fight like that. Along with you, All Might, you used up the last parts of your quirk. You're not going to be able to help me with the fight anymore. That means if we really want All For One to be gone for good, you're going to have to give me just a permit to kill Shigaraki, or All For One. Nezu, along with the heroes, would look on at Izuku, as All Might would end up just looking on questioningly at Izuku. Are you sure you want to do this, Izuku? Are you sure you really want to take someone's life? Are you really sure it's for the greater good, All Might? Shigaraki's going to kill hundreds more people if we don't do it sooner or later. He's going to steal their quirks. By now, All For One, after being defeated once before, he's going to start preparing for this. So if we start seeing lifeless husks of people just lying on the ground, we're going to know who it was. As he's going to be frantic, trying to find another quirk or more quirks that could possibly somehow make him stronger enough to be able to defeat me, Izuku would say, as all of them would end up nodding their head. So, I guess we should start preparing, Nezu would say as Izuku would nod. We cut back to see the night would pass as we now see All Might walking back to the third-year dormitories where he would end up meeting up with Mirio. So, luckily I was able to survive that fight against All For One. However, now I need to train you on how to use All For One for All, my quirk, as I fear All For One's still alive, and that's why this quirk exists. One for All exists to fight All For One, the fight against good and evil. So now I'm training you, Mirio, because I deemed you worthy of my quirk. All Might would say as Mirio would look on towards All Might. Okay, as the training would then begin to train Mirio enough so that he could use his quirk. However, Mirio was already super strong, and so he could easily handle 25% of One For All right out from the start, as he would even be smart enough to use full cowling, much like Izuku had learned, however much sooner than Izuku had. So, with that, Izuku, now we cut back to him, as many of his classmates in the dorms would just be saying, I saw you on TV, Izuku. It's the first time I saw you fight. Still can't believe you're an actual pro hero now and you're not just one of our classmates. It's still so weird to think about, many of them would say, as Izuku would just sort of awkwardly laugh. Yeah, it is still super weird. As we then look back onto the TV, as we then see the news start to report. As the quirkless hero hero who has stopped many just villains the past. The Quirkless hero, otherwise known as No Quirk Man, has defeated many villains now, as the public is questioning if he really doesn't have a quirk after what had happened just last night. However, this has sparked joy throughout the quirkless population, just as another form of hope that they too can become a hero. And that is where I'm going to leave this What If off, everyone. I hope you guys did enjoy part 6 of What If Deku was One Punch Man. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.